think there's a lot of parallels between running and life, running and business. It's when you step back and think about it, the parallels are actually everywhere. So I think one clear thing that I've learned that I think, again, applies in so many areas is success in running and improvement in running happens over the long term, not over the short term. It takes not days and weeks, it takes months and years to see dramatic improvements in running, and you have to have a long-term mindset, and you have to prioritize consistency over necessarily short-term intensity. When you do things that are unsustainable, when you push too hard in running, you end up paying for it. You have setbacks, you have fatigue. In the worst cases, you actually end up breaking and getting hurt. And of course, many runners, I would say maybe all runners, face that at some point in their running journey. I certainly did, and so I learned that lesson through trial and error, and I think that's one clear parallel that I've seen.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I am just so grateful for you all, for all the feedback, the reviews, everything you guys have been throwing my way. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Again, those reviews go a really long way. Also, check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. You all know I'll sign it out, send it myself. Today's guest is Royi Metser. He's the founder and CEO of Avelo, on a mission to help every athlete run faster, stronger, and more resiliently by creating the world's smartest running shoe. Prior to founding Avelo, he spent 7 years as head of business development at high-growth consumer health technology company Inside Tracker and 5 years in investment banking. Today, he's driven to help millions of people improve their health and wellness through the sport of running. Royi, thank you for joining me.
I appreciate you having me.
Of course, man. I'm going to do something a lot differently today than I do on every other episode, and there's a reason why. I want to get the call to action out there early, and the reason why is because you're at such a critical stage in your venture and what it is that you're working on today. So let's talk about specifically, I know I gave the bio, give a little bit of background on Avelo, and, to anyone out there who's listening, who's a runner, what do you want them to walk away from today's episode with?
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been 2.5 years of hard work to get to this point with Avelo. So as you mentioned, we're building a smart running shoe for runners to help them reduce their risk of injury, improve their performance, and accomplish their running goals. It was born out of a personal passion that I had for running and some frustration that I had, some challenges that I faced in my running journey. And so I set out to create a product that I felt could help me, and as a result could also benefit millions of other people who love this sport so much. So we've built a pretty amazing shoe. It's a super trainer. It's got technology embedded in the foam that measures your running form and measures the forces that are acting on your body. And then it uses that data to provide you with insight around the mechanical stress that your body's experiencing on every run. We call it an impact score, as well as a daily indication of whether you're pushing the right amount or pushing too much, and whether you should continue to train hard or recover. It helps you understand your efficiency, which is critical for your running performance. So how efficiently are you moving through space? It's like the miles per gallon of your body. And then lastly, it helps you understand the unique way that you move and alerts you anytime that there's a breakdown in your form, which can happen on, you were just describing the long runs you've got planned in your marathon training plan. So that can certainly happen as you fatigue, which can lead to some potential issues as well if you're not aware of it. So that's at a high level what the product does. And yeah, we've been working hard for 2.5 years. We came out of stealth a little bit earlier this year, announced publicly what we're doing, and we're less than a week away now from officially launching for the first time our product actually on Kickstarter, which is the first time that the running community is going to be able to support our company directly, pre-order the product. So it's a pretty exciting time for us. There's been a lot of work from a lot of really great and talented people to get to this point.
And for context for the listeners, today is June 18th. That's the day of today's conversation. Um, Rui, what would you like the listeners to do? Where can they follow you? Where can they find you? And how can they kind of keep an eye and ear on the ground with regards to what it is that you guys are doing?
The best place is probably our website. It's www.avelorunning.com. And if you visit that website after we go live on Kickstarter, which this episode will be live after that point, there'll be all the information on our website to get to the Kickstarter campaign page and learn more about the product and the project. And, if runners are interested backing the campaign and pre-ordering the product.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, cool. I'm glad that we did that up front because I do think it's very important when we bring on guests like yourself that we do what we can to support you from the Mile 40 community. So now let's take a
Appreciate
step
that.
back here. We want to get
Sounds
to know
good.
you, the man behind the mission. We want to get to know how we got here and what led you to be leading such a cool and really, it's a type of venture that we all anticipated was going to happen at some point, but we just wasn't sure how and what it was going to look like. So taking a step back, tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and a little bit about life earlier on for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll take you first back to 2021, which is kind of where my running journey begins. So it's about 4 years ago. And, as you mentioned in my bio, I was working at a company, a pretty cool company called Inside Tracker, where we actually worked with a lot of endurance athletes there, but I was the head of business development. But most importantly, I was living in Boston, which is where I'm from. I was born there, I grew up there. And it was about a year and a half, a year into the coronavirus pandemic. And so Boston had been shut down for that entire time pretty much. And so I was working from home and there was very little access to gyms. The gym I had access to was closed. And so I basically had stopped exercising for a year and a half, which for the first time in my life, that was the case. And I've always been very into health and fitness. It's an important part of my life. I played sports growing up. I had different phases where I did CrossFit and played team sports, and running had always been something that I loved to do for cardio. It was never my primary form of fitness, but again, for the first time, I hadn't exercised for over a year, and that was very unusual. And as a result, my health had deteriorated.
Mm.
I gained a lot of weight, and it was actually a blood test that I did through the company I was working for, Inside Tracker, that was the wake up call that I needed to make a change. So I got blood test results that were not good, and the result was that 3 days later, I decided I needed to do something, and I signed up for my first marathon. And that was the first step I took in my running journey, really, and in running becoming my primary passion, my primary form of fitness, the activity that I had goals around. I trained for that marathon for 6 months and finished it later in 2021. I completely fell in love with running and training and racing, and I ran another marathon a year later, and it was through that personal running journey and desire to improve at running that I actually started to think about how I could improve personally, and that's when the idea to actually build a product for me and for other runners came to be.
When for that first marathon, I mean, a lot of time when people set themselves up like that, especially where they're on the back of, finding themselves at a low moment, they tend to have a little bit of a love hate during that 6 month cycle, and even during that first marathon while they're out there. Was there a little bit of friction, or was it just you know an immediate, this is good for me, I'm going to keep going?
I know that the first few weeks were challenging because to go basically from the couch to running is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. I tend to be someone that, I need to take a kind of go all in on something. So signing up for that marathon gave me a very specific and tangible goal. I had a date on the calendar that I had to be ready for, and I had a training plan that I could follow. And that structure and goal actually made it really motivating for me to train. And so I got pretty excited about it. There's no doubt that the first few weeks were hard, but you start to see some progress, and that's also motivating. And so it creates this cycle that kind of builds on itself. And so yeah, I think that first step was really hard, but there's the saying that action leads to motivation and not the other way around. And that was certainly the case for me.
What race was that first race?
And so I actually signed up for a local race. It was the Cape Cod Marathon, which ended up getting canceled a few days before the race. So I had to pivot and find a race that was around that time. I ended up running the Manchester, New Hampshire Marathon a week later.
And when it came to training, were you doing most of it on your own? Were you involved in any sort of running communities?
Yeah, so during my time at Insight Tracker, I also built a program called Insight Tracker Pro where we worked with running coaches and other coaches, physical therapists, physicians to use the product to help their athletes and clients. And so I was very connected after, a couple of years of building that program with the running community, specifically the coaching community in running. And so I spent maybe a month training on my own, but very quickly I actually hired a coach because I decided that I wanted to take this even more seriously and get some guidance and some more structure. And so I was working with a coach for the majority of that training block.
What did over so now it's been 4 years. What has running taught you most about yourself?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels between running and life, running and business. It's when you step back and think about it, the parallels are actually everywhere. So I think one clear thing that I've learned that I think again applies in so many areas is running success in running and improvement in running happens over the long term, not over the short term. So it takes not days and weeks, it takes months and years to see dramatic improvements in running. And you have to have a long-term mindset and you have to prioritize consistency over necessarily short-term intensity. Of course, intensity is important to improve, but generally speaking, again, you're talking about it'll take you years to really see meaningful changes, especially if you have ambitious running goals. And so, I think that applies in life. It applies in business. Just taking having a long-term mindset, and really prioritizing consistency rather than short-term unsustainable intensity. So I think that's something that I learned the hard way in running, honestly. Like when you do things that are unsustainable, when you push too hard in running, you end up paying for it. You have setbacks, you have fatigue. In the worst cases, you actually end up breaking and getting hurt. And of course, many runners, I would say maybe all runners face that at some point in their running journey. I certainly did. And so I learned that lesson through trial and error. And I think that's one clear parallel that I've seen.
Was that a lesson that you had employed in other areas of your life and it just kind of shocked you when you saw the parallel, or was that just an overall lesson that once you kind of saw it in running, especially alongside what you're doing from a business perspective, you're starting to think, "Oh, like there's a method here."
I think it's something that I realized after some reflection, like only recently, maybe in the last year or two, and through conversations with other entrepreneurs, other runners, reading about other runners' experiences too. And again, reading some of the best coaches' advice around prioritizing again that having long term goals and prioritizing consistency in running. And so I think I'm taking that approach in my life. When I think about where I want to be in my life, of course I have goals that are more short term, monthly, quarterly, even yearly goals. But I'm also thinking, 3, 5, 10 years ahead. Who do I want to be? What's the person I want to be in 10 years? What's the life I want to have in 10 years? Same in business, right? Like where do I want Avelo to be in 10 years? And what are the processes and systems that I have to have today to make sure that I can make it to that 10-year mark? Because it's very easy to burn out, not just in running, but also in entrepreneurship. And so having routines where, I'm also prioritizing my health as an entrepreneur, which it takes conscious effort, right? Like you can very easily work and work and work, and exercise and health and relationships kind of fall to the side. That might be required for short, intense periods, but it makes it very likely that you're going to burn out if you do it that way, and not allow you to build the company that you want to build. And so I'm trying to balance those things as much as I can, and it's a lesson I learned after some reflection.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, when you think about where we are, especially in the world of startups, it's a topic that's top of mind now for a lot of people because it used to be the other way around. People used to accept the fact that they were going to have to give up 10 years of their life to live the rest of their life on their own means. But what I think people are realizing is that, there's a benefit to that balance. That way they're preserving the rest of the life after those 10 years. And so I did want to ask, did you always characterize yourself as being innovative and creative, like even in the realm of the corporate world prior to Avelo?
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap up the last point
Yeah,
too, there's no question that startups are hard. Like
yeah,
I don't want to suggest that entrepreneurs don't have to work
of
hard,
course.
because it is very intense. The hours are long. It requires a lot of sacrifice, and so especially in certain periods, there are really intense periods where you don't have a choice. Other things fall down on the list of priorities. But generally speaking, trying to make decisions where you're prioritizing long term success, I think is the smarter, more sustainable approach that ultimately leads you to build a more successful company, be a better entrepreneur. Right? If you're exercising, it's not just good for your mental health, it's for your physical health, it's good for your mental health. You're gonna make better decisions in the workplace, you're gonna be a better leader for your team, you're gonna be more, just clear thinker, right? So there's a ton of benefits to having a balanced, as much as you can, a balance there as well. Now, yeah, on the creativity and innovation, I think, after spending 7 years at a startup, I learned a lot about how to grow a startup from a pretty early stage, to the point where, at the end of my 7-year run on Insight Tracker, we were a pretty significant, we were experiencing significant growth. We had grown to a nice level. And so I learned a lot about how to get to that point, through my journey there. And I think there were times during that experience where I did feel, and luckily I had a mentor who was the CEO of the company, who gave me the freedom to also, take a lot of ownership of certain initiatives within the company, and make decisions. And so it was through that process that I got, interested in creating things from, from a very early stage, or even from nothing, and really working through making those things come to life, from an idea in your brain to actually making them a reality. And I think, early on in my life, I was very lucky. I have two incredible parents, and my dad is a serial entrepreneur. So I think I was around entrepreneurship early on. My dad was my role model. So I, from a very young age, knew that I wanted to be either, involved in an early stage venture at the very beginning, or go off and start something, and create something new, and bring something new and valuable to the world. So I think that also influenced me.
The reason I ask is because when I think about even my own platform, most of my creativity and innovation now comes when I'm out on runs, and it's not intentional. Not by any means is it intentional, but if you find yourself out there for 5, 10, 15 miles, your mind goes to places you never thought it was going to go, and then all of a sudden, it clicks, and it's like, "Oh, like, why didn't I think of that earlier? Like, why didn't I implement that earlier?" And, especially given what it is that you're doing specifically right now, and how it directly correlates, obviously, to the sport. I'm wondering around, you know, when you find yourself in a tough place business wise, and when you have to make a tough decision, or you have to kind of figure out which way you're going to steer the ship, is it one of those things where you're consciously like, you know what, I'm going to go out on a run, before I make a decision here?
There's no question. I've had that experience countless times. I think probably every runner has, where they have some of their best ideas when they're in the middle of that run. And I think that's another benefit. Yeah, we didn't talk about, but you load a problem into your brain, and you're staring at it, and you're sitting there on the computer, and you think that if you just spend another few hours in front of the computer, you're going to finally crack it. But really, the best decision you can make in that situation is to take a step away, and yeah, go. And for us, it's running. For others, it might be other forms of exercise. But there is no question that, let's put it this way: I can't remember a time where I felt worse after a run than I did before the run. And that's both physically and mentally. Of course, you feel tired and fatigued, especially after hard efforts, but like it just, it forces you to think about things in a different way. And I've had, again, as you have, some of my best ideas while running. So it's definitely a great way to work through tough problems. And that's been my experience as well. Like, there's been so many times where I'm on my run, and I run with my phone because I listen to music, and I'll like pull out my phone and either like record a voice memo about something I just thought of, or like be texting myself while I'm running. It happens all the time.
Agreed, agreed. I mean, it's definitely it's a cheat code of sorts, and I think to people who are new to the running world, or it's a little, you wouldn't think it's the case, but it's absolutely, you know been, one of the biggest game changers for me personally. And I know that a lot of people, such as yourself, people that are creating and people that are constantly innovating, a lot of times it's like, hey, before I make a decision, I got to get out there and just kind of even see if I'm thinking about this. A lot of times you go out there on the run and then you realize maybe I wasn't thinking about that right. And then you kind of change course after that. And it's one of those unique phenomenons around the sport, and I'm sure there's a lot of psychology behind it too, with regards to what's going on in your body while you're kind of shifting there. Um, you had mentioned your father and the influence that he had on you, and as you're kind of building this, have you been looping him in? Has he been an advisor to you of sorts? And what's that relationship been like?
I'm very lucky to have a mentor who's also my father that I can speak with anytime there's either something good, something challenging happening. And so absolutely, he's been an amazing mentor for me for a long time. And on this journey over the last 2.5 years, he has so much wisdom and experience that he's gained over his, decades long career as an entrepreneur and very successful one. So absolutely, he's been invaluable in helping me think through tough problems. Like I'm very lucky in that regard, and I hope that one day I'll be able to also give back to the next generation of entrepreneurs in some way, because I think entrepreneurship is such an important part of our economy, of our society. And so I hope to also be able to give back some of the wisdom that hopefully I will accumulate over the coming years and decades as well. So it's been amazing to have that mentor by my side.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. I get asked a lot about my training programs and how I set myself up for success to cross finish lines all over the world. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Recovery is half the battle. And in order to get that recovery, I rely on clean sources of protein. That's why my go to protein shake is Owen. Only what you need. I have one after every single workout. 100% vegan and plant-based, Owen's plant-based shakes use a multi-source protein blend of pea, pumpkin seed, and flax seeds to include all essential amino acids to promote optimal daily health. Uncompromised taste. Owen brings together the essential elements of advanced nutrition, amazingly clean ingredients, functional superiority, and uncompromised taste. Now go ahead, go to www.liveowen.com. That's spelled LIVEOWYN.com. Use code MILE40 for 20% off your next purchase. Only what you need. Whether it's your dad or other influences who have played a role, how have you been prepared to handle either success or failure? Like, what is your relationship with failing? And, whether it's Avelo or with anything else that, you've gone through in your life, or with, let's say things pop off and things go great. Do you feel grounded enough to handle success? And do you feel like you've been prepped enough to handle success?
It's such a good question. I don't know that you're ever going to be fully prepared. There's no perfect time, I don't think, to do something as challenging as, for example, start a company or join a company, leave a job, an established job, and join a company in an early stage, or do anything that requires kind of a big change, a big step. There's probably never going to be the perfect time. I left my job, my last job, when I was waking up in the morning, and I was all I could think about was Avelo and this product and the problems I was facing as a runner and the benefits that I felt like this technology and product could have. Like that's when it was clear to me that I had to pursue it. But I I don't know that I was 100% prepared to. I don't know that I had a clear roadmap on exactly what to do. I think I had some ideas for what to do, and of course, I created a strategy and a plan, and I followed it as best as I could. But you learn as you go. Um, you don't know with 100% certainty that it's going to be successful. I mean, the reality is that most startups fail. That's the harsh reality, and so you have to go into it, um, of course, with a plan, but really with grit and just the mindset that you're going to be resilient. You're going to. I try not to get too high when things. It sounds very cliche, but too high when things are going well, and too low when things are not going well. Yeah, and just be consistent no matter what, even if things are going well or not going well. Just try to be consistent. And I don't know that. there's any real way to prepare for it other than just to do it and kind of learn from experience, I think that that's the best way.
And specifically when it comes to the mindset around failure, right? A lot of times it comes up on this show, the idea of there's no real such thing as failure. It's a learning moment or a learning experience, if anything, at best. However, there's definitely a way to exercise the brain so that way when the L's come, you're okay, facing them head on, and understanding, when you need to react, how you need to react. Every time I have someone at this phase in the game on the show, one of the questions I ask them is, how many times did you consider walking away? So talk to us a little about your personal relationship with dealing with failure, and hey, how many times did you consider walking away?
I think the way to build resilience around failure is honestly just to experience it. Like you go through challenging moments, and in that moment it feels like a very challenging moment. It feels sometimes overwhelming, and you realize after going through it that you survived and life went on, and you still woke up the next day, hopefully, thankfully, in the cases, most of the cases that we're talking about, that's the case, especially a failure in, business. And you have to keep going. And in hindsight, looking back at things that happen, maybe negative things that happened a year, 2, 3 years ago, it always looks less scary and less terrible in hindsight. And so with experience, once you go through those moments a few times, you realize that no matter what happens, like life is going to go on. You're going to be able to deal with it because you've done it before. And I think, again, having those experiences a few times kind of trains you and teaches you to not get too low and just be. The term is resilient. I've said it a few times. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. Just be ready for things to be hard and be ready to keep going when they get hard. And we talk about that as a team all the time. At Avelo, I think it's important in any startup. Um, Thankfully, there hasn't been a time where I've wanted to walk away. There's been times where it's been really hard. There's been times where I've been really down when I've gotten rejected, when things have not gone as planned. I mean, that's going to continue to happen. But again, you go into this knowing that that's going to happen, and you have to be ready to experience that. It's okay to get down about it, but know that you're going to wake up again and you're going to just put the next foot forward and you're going to keep going. I mean, that's really the only way, because so many things go wrong when you build a company. So many things.
Well, one of the things that has come up over and over again is the idea of what really is that worst case scenario. That worst case scenario is never really as bad as perhaps
Yeah,
you initially think it is.
yeah.
And it's training yourself to kind of understand that and kind of take a step back and realize, okay, like what happens if this deal falls through? What happens if I don't get this funding? What happens if this employee walks out? Like, is it as bad as I think it is, or is is the solution going to be that I'm going to struggle for a little bit? Or, worst case scenario, like you said, fortunately you have two loving parents. I'm pretty sure you'll have a couch to crash on if, things go wrong. And so I think sometimes people need to take a step back and remind themselves of just how important that exercise is, of what really is, the worst case scenario with regards to a lot of this. Um, so specifically with Avelo and your journey with Avelo, talk to me a little bit about, and this is more educational, right? Because a lot of people kind of find themselves in the same situation as you, whereas they're going through their motions in their last job, they have this great idea, they want to get to work on it, but a lot of times they don't even know where to begin. And even when they get started, it's a matter of like just pulling all the pieces together, and they're not even sure where the pieces are and how to connect them. So, what was the first step to get things got rolling on your end?
Yeah, I it was for me born out of a passion for the activity, for the sport, for running, and therefore natural interest in it and the products around it. Natural natural interest in how to improve running performance, natural interest in how to reduce injury risk, interest in data So I was working at a company that was very data heavy. The product was based on biomarkers and using data about the body to help people improve their health and performance. So I had some experience there. But long story short, it was really born out of a personal interest in this topic, which I pursued by consuming as much content and information as I could about physiology, about biomechanics, about footwear, about injuries. And eventually that passion led to enough interest and enough knowledge to say, like, oh, maybe there is an opportunity for a company and a product that could provide value to runners. And it started with me putting that down on paper. Like I had some experience. So for me, I kind of had a rough idea for what information I would need to think through and what questions I would need to answer and assumptions I would need to test to gain conviction on this idea. And so I wrote essentially a pitch deck and a high level business plan around the concept. And, you outline the big pieces, right? Like, what's the problem? What's the solution? Hopefully, this doesn't sound too cliche, but this is the
No,
reality.
that's fair.
What's the solution? What's the market? Who's the customer? What is the available competition look like if there is some? And what's how are you differentiated? High level pricing, right? Like, just to get some thoughts down on paper, and then ran it by as many people whose opinion I respected and who had experience or knowledge in that field or related fields as I could to stress test some of those answers that I put down to those questions and some of the assumptions I was making. And that took probably 6 months. I was doing it on nights and weekends for about 6 months while I was at my prior job. And eventually I gained enough conviction and I was waking up, like I said, like in the morning, really just all I could think about was this. And so the combination of those two things led me to make the decision like, okay, if this is going to be successful, then it can't be a side project any longer. It's got to be a full-time thing. I'm going to have to give it 110%. But it took a few months of really putting pen to paper. I think you can't leave things in your brain. Like, problems become a lot clearer when you actually write them down and you write about them. And so that's a great process for me still when I'm thinking through a hard problem, is to really write down my thoughts and try to write down a plan around how I'm going to solve it. But that was the first step
How many iterations have there been
of
of, what you put down initially on pen to paper with regards to the idea versus where we are now? And I know you might not have a number, but like, are we talking several? Like, how much has the concept changed since, the first time you put pen to paper?
the concept has actually remained pretty a high level concept, and vision and mission has been very consistent. So that's been great. I think there have been so many unexpected things that have come up, or things that we've learned, or decisions we've had to make, or compromises we've had to make. I mean, again, like when you're creating a startup, especially when you're building, I mean, really any startup's creating something new, and so there's not necessarily a blueprint.
Sure.
Like, you can't predict
Yeah.
everything ahead of time.
Yep.
And so you have to be flexible and nimble. That's one of the advantages that startups have versus big companies, is that they are typically more flexible and nimble.
Yep.
Things have changed a million times. Like, I couldn't put a number on it because there's too many things that have come up that we've learned that we couldn't have known ahead of time. And again, the only way to discover those things is to take action and go.
Um, when you think about the different people that you're dealing with, right? The stakeholders from an investor or business perspective, right? You think about those decks you put together and the messaging that you're sharing with them. And then you think about the end consumer. It's almost like two different languages. You might be saying the same thing, but you might be saying it speaking in two different
100%.
languages, right?
100%. Yes.
And, talk to me a little bit about your experience flexing that muscle and kind of, especially in your role, right? You need to make everybody happy. You need to make your potential end customer happy, as well as the people who are potentially backing you, or that you need to back you, or that you need to support you. Is there a heavy intersection there, or at times do you feel tugged in different directions?
No, I think you have to speak to those different stakeholders differently. There's no question about that. I think there's 100% there's overlap, but like, your customer doesn't care about the market size or the market opportunity or the competition. I mean, they know about it because if they're in that market, then they're probably aware of some of the other products, but like, they care about what's in it for them. And so you have to speak to them that way. You have to speak to them authentically. You have to be trustworthy. You have to be credible. You have to understand their problem. Luckily, me and most of the people on our team, we're all runners. So like we're building the product that we want, which I think is actually a big advantage in entrepreneurship is to be the customer. So that's certainly the case in our company. But yeah, I mean that's been a really interesting journey for us because it's the first time, and for me in particular, because it's the first time I'm really building something from scratch. And so you're really inventing all of your messaging, all of your creative, all of your visuals, all of your videos from scratch, and you're kind of learning what resonates and what doesn't on the fly. Again, same deal though. There to find the right messaging for investors and for the market for your customers. Like the only way to figure that out is to try stuff. Like go through the process of trying, seeing what works. Okay, you iterate, you improve it, you try again. Like that. That's the only way. It's the only way.
One other thing that, we talked about the last time that we spoke, but I want to give the audience a sense of this. When you think about runners in general, right? That's a broad term, right? There are people out there who are working on running their first mile, people out there who signed up for their first race and have no idea if they're ever going to run again. And then there are people obviously who are a little bit more seasoned who take on running as a lifestyle. And when you're building a product catered toward the running community, I found it's very difficult to appease every single one of those groups. So when you think about, Avelo in particular, how are you going about it? And have you had to make any changes there?
Yeah, we have, and we probably will continue to have to. You can't serve everyone. You have to be very focused, especially when you're launching a new product. Um, I subscribe to the notion that it's better to make a smaller group of people really, really happy and fall in love with your product than it is to make a larger group of people just kind of like your product when you're early. And so, yeah, we've defined our target customer, our target user. We actually call them the front runner, and we think about them not necessarily in their experience level in running. We think about it as their attitude and kind of characteristics, personality characteristics. So this is a person that's competitive, but what we mean by that is not necessarily competitive like they want to beat other people. They might, but really it's about being competitive with yourself. So this is a person that desires improvement. They are they are striving to improve at running. They probably have a particular goal that they're looking to achieve, a running goal. That could be anything from, again, running your first 5K. You're currently, not exercising at all and you want to run your first 5K, or you want to run a sub 3 hour marathon and qualify for Boston, or anything in between. But they're actively seeking products and solutions that are can help them accomplish that goal. They're probably already tracking their running in some form. Like almost all of the runners that we've interviewed in our research are wearing a Garmin or an Apple Watch or a Coro smartwatch. So they're used to using wearable devices to track their running, probably on Strava. Um, and yeah, that's how we think about them at a high level. So again, it's a very motivated, competitive minded uh, runner that really desires improvement and is looking for products that can help them accomplish their ambitious running goals more efficiently with less trial and error, with less setbacks.
Two things come to mind when it comes to the devices, and I think, I showed you last time, right? I got the Whoop in one
Yeah,
hand, the Garmin in the other hand.
yeah,
And look, I like both and I use both. And they help me with regards to some of the goals that I'm looking to accomplish. Um, but as myself, someone who runs a lot, there is a little bit of device fatigue kind of creeping in.
no question.
And I wanna get your insight with regards to that. It's like, there is no other way around. I won't know my heart rate unless I use these devices, but I also know that my heart rate isn't 100% accurate using these devices. I won't know, how my sleeping is without my Whoop, but at the same time, sometimes I wake up and I read the measurement and I'm wondering, how does it know that? How accurate could this thing really be? I mean, again, I'm not crapping on either of the devices, but, you know, there's definitely, a little bit of fatigue with regards to, working with these. Talk to me about your thoughts on that and, now that you know that you're going into this market, how that impacts you.
Yeah, I think the wearable device market has exploded in the last decade or 15 years. And with that, I think has come absolutely fatigue, data fatigue. I mean, there are some runners that have reached the point where they actually don't run with their watch at all. They want to go out and they want to be in nature and they don't want to think about any device telling them what pace they're running or what their specific heart rate is. They just want to run by feel. And that's probably a beautiful experience too. I think one of the frameworks that I found really helpful that was actually brought up to me by one of our scientific advisors is to think about these devices as more of a decision support tool rather than a decision making tool. So obviously you have to trust that the data that you're getting is high quality. It's never going to be as accurate as the data you get, for example, from going into a sleep lab or going into a biomechanics lab in our case. Like that's not the goal. The goal is to be accurate enough. Most importantly, be consistent and reliable so that the data you're measuring over time changes in a similar way to the way it would change in the lab. But you're making data that was previously inaccessible in the field. You could only get it by going into the lab. You're making that available on every step, right? On every day. So I think that's really the value is continuous monitoring. But people need to look at these things, in my opinion, as decision support systems. So it's giving you more information so that you can make smarter decisions. It's never going to know everything about your life. It's not going to know what's in your brain. It's not going to have all the context on you. It can't.
Yeah.
Over time, it'll get smarter.
Yeah.
It'll have more information about you, but it's giving you data. And then you're in the driver's seat to make the decisions based on that data. And you take that data, you take it into account based on all the other things that are happening in your life. And you use that information to hopefully make better, smarter decisions than you would if you didn't have that information. So again, it's not in the driver's seat. And sometimes it's really hard to get out of that mindset. You wake up in the morning, maybe, for example, I don't know, Whoop is telling you that you're not recovered and you feel
Yeah.
great. Or
Yeah.
you didn't, Whoop is telling you slept like crap and you feel like you didn't, So that's where you can override what the system is telling you. That's okay. But I think in any decision-making process, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's running, like you gather as much data as you can so that you can make the best, most informed decision, but you're the one making the decision. I think that's the right way to think about these things. And that's what we hope to give runners is better information so they can make smarter, better decisions.
Well, one thing that I thought about as you were talking, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I do want to call it out. Do you use the Nike running app, or
I
have you?
actually have never, no, I've never used it. I use Strava and I have a Garmin and I have a
Okay.
Aura Ring, but I haven't used the Nike
So
running app.
when I very first started running, I'm pulling it up right now. Back in 2015, I started using the Nike running app, but I use all of them now, right? And everything syncs to Strava, but it all goes back. So Nike has this thing where it tracks all your mileage, right? And every time you hit a certain mile marker, you hit a certain level. And I mean, it's going to be hard for people to see on the screen here, but essentially, I'm
Yep.
almost at the final level, which is what they call the vault. And you have to run 9,320 miles to hit the
Wow.
vault, right?
Nice.
Over
Yeah.
the course of your running lifetime. And I remember when I was at 0 miles and now as I'm approaching that number. And this has been over now like 10, 11 years, right? And now that I'm approaching that number, I don't know what it's done to me psychologically, but psychologically, it really bums me out that when I hit that number, nothing happens. Like Nike doesn't even send you an email to say thank you or like congratulations or anything like that. And I think I spoke about this maybe on another episode, and then I'm going to bring it up again because it just goes back up to the idea of tying emotions and I'm not going to say mental health, but emotional health, and there's an emotional tie to hitting some of the metrics on these devices. I can tell you for sure at mile 100, I did not care at all about this Nike app. But now that I'm getting closer, I'm like, what did I put all this work in if they're not even going to send me like a congratulatory email when I hit this mile marker? I say that really just to kind of go on a little bit of a rant, but also to kind of speak to a founder who's working on something like this and encouraging you to kind of keep in mind beyond the fact that obviously as a runner, I want to have all the data and I want to be able to have the most efficient information to make sure that I'm best trained and best qualified for meeting my goals. I also want to feel that Avelo or whatever company, is behind whatever it is that I'm working with is a part of my journey and, is supporting me because I think as you and I both know, especially in the world of running, community means everything.
Yeah. I think what you said is it's 100% true unfortunately, it's actually really hard to make software that has emotion, that taps into that kind of behavioral psychology, and a lot of software feels emotionless. Um, we are consumers. All of us on the team are consumers of health and fitness technology and devices, and so we're also building software that we want. And it's really important to, I think, in the best case, like software like this and products like this are motivating. They are encouraging. Like I don't want to use the term, but I'm going to. Like it's a more of a like a gamified
Yeah.
experience, and gamified just means that there's systems and structure in place to, again, reward you when things go well, and of course encourage you when, even when things are not going well, and really motivate you to take the right action, establish the right habits, and that's not easy to do well in software. It's really not, especially when you're building software that is trying to take all of this data, a lot of data that runners, like the average runner, might not fully know about, or this is the first time that they're getting exposed to it. And you have to expose them to it and educate them about it. There's a lot of education that has to go into explaining why it matters and what to do about it. That's not easy either, right? So we're trying to take an approach of, like, we call it progressive disclosure, where, we're going to surface the top level insight to you, and like, why should you care, and what do you do about it? That's at the high level. And then if you want to, for the runners that are more motivated, that maybe have more time, that have more interest, they can drill down as far as they want and learn as much as they want about that particular insight or metric or data behind it, but you don't have to necessarily to get value out of it. And so we're working hard to do that. It's really challenging. I think AI also creates opportunities to build exceptional software experiences that maybe weren't possible before. So, we've got, we call it personal running intelligence, PRI, but pre is the coach in the app. Pre is the technology that sits in your shoe, and pre is going to talk to you while you're running, ideally, and keep you motivated and give you insights in the app, right? So it's almost like you've got this kind of ambient helper, ambient guide that's with you on your running journey, that knows a lot about your running and is giving you valuable guidance along that journey. Again, not easy to do that well,
Yeah.
and not easy to build that in a way that doesn't feel impersonal or kind of lazy. That's very challenging, but I think it's more possible today than ever before, and we're working really hard to build that sort of experience, the experience that we want.
Well, look, personally, I find comfort in knowing that, someone like yourself keeps that in the back of their head as they're building, right? And, that's always reassuring to someone within the running community, to know that the people who are behind, the product are thinking about these things. And, even, the fact that you can be transparent and authentic about the fact that it's not easy in and of itself is very, very important. So thank you for addressing that. The last question I have for you, and this is more, something to kind of think about when you think about your journey over the last couple of years with Avelo, and you think about the things that have gone right, as well as the changes that you've had to make. Think about yourself as a leader specifically. What specifically could you do 10% better as a leader, to help take Avelo to, the level that perhaps you want it to go?
That's a great question. There's probably a lot of things, honestly. Probably a lot of things. I think, as a leader, one of my most important roles is to set the vision and direction for the company. Where do we want to go? Where are we heading, and why? To communicate that clearly to our team, both of which are not easy to do, and then empower the people on the team to accomplish the things that they need to accomplish in their specific functional areas that are required for us to realize that vision. And I think that requires clear communication. It also requires just relentless optimism, because things go wrong in startups like every week, probably honestly every single day. And so as one of the leaders in the company, uh, the CEO and founder, it's important to be relentlessly optimistic and to try to instill that mindset in your team. And I think that also leads to resilience, right? If you believe things are going to work out, if you stay optimistic when things are going wrong, then I think you're more likely to successfully work through those challenges. So I think that's probably the one area where I have to constantly remind myself, like, because we're all human. Like, as a founder and CEO, like, you experience those negative emotions when things don't go wrong, when you have setbacks, when there's roadblocks. And so you need to show up for your team in a way that's productive and motivating for them. It's important to be vulnerable, I think, too. Like, you don't wanna fake it. Like, when things go wrong, you wanna acknowledge, "Hey, that sucks," or "That's really frustrating," or "That's too bad," but, like, okay, what do we do about it, right? Like, how do you flip it and take positive action? So I think just relentless optimism is something that I'm trying to always remind myself, like, "Hey, like, look at the glass half full." Like, really try to frame these challenges as opportunities to overcome them and build something that's really valuable that no one's built before, and if we are able to successfully navigate this challenge and overcome it, then look at all the value we'll be able to deliver to our customers. Look at the valuable company we're going to be able to build, because it's the hard things that are valuable. Like, we need to look at it that way. So I think just being relentlessly optimistic, if I could continue to be better at that, I think our company will be better off.
Rui, I think that's so awesome. And I appreciate the vulnerability, the authenticity, and I appreciate you for taking a leap on something that I think could be extremely beneficial, not just to this community, but to runners everywhere. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for the impact you're having on the community everywhere. So I just want to say thanks for coming on today.
I appreciate you having me, and congratulations on the progress on the podcast. I think your journey is also very inspiring. We talked about it a little bit when we chatted before this. So I appreciate you taking an episode to have me on, and thank you. And I'll be following along your journey as well. Absolutely.
You got it, brother.